So first of all, I'm super excited to be here. It's always a pleasure to give a talk here at Test Tribe. I consider it as a privilege, and I really appreciate you having me as a speaker. Secondly, today we're gonna talk about different strategies and tips to be an effective leader in this new era where everything is hybrid and remote work environment and we live in a virtual world. And that being the case, how to succeed as a leader. So that's what we are going to talk about today. We have only 24 minutes, so I want to make sure I give you as much value as possible. So let's just get started. First thing first is we have to talk about empowered leadership, right? So when we say empowered leadership, what I mean is empowering people to become the best version of themselves. And when we talk about empowered leadership, there are four key things you want to keep in mind. First is providing clarity. So, as a leader, you have to set clear goals, deadlines, and expectations. That is providing clarity. And then you develop the person, then motivate the person. And then your job is to sit in the background as a leader and let the other person run the show, right? And you're there just to remove obstacles and let the resource run the show. And that's what empowerment is all about. And you have to give that autonomy for your employees to discover what their strengths are and let them succeed, let them fail, but you are there in the background supporting them. That's what are the four pillars of empowered leadership. And how you can empower your teams, there's some strategies which I've personally used, which I'm going to talk about here. First thing is one-on-one conversations, right? You have to use these one-on-one conversations when you talk to the individual, and you really need to focus on their strengths. So one of the biggest mistakes I've seen leaders make is that they always have this one-on-one and they start with this saying, "Oh, okay, I heard that, you did such and such thing. We have to improve on it. Let's see how we can improve," right? And they spend, if you have a 1 hour one-on-one, you spend 45 minutes focusing on the weaknesses. That's the number one mistake people make as a leader. As a leader, you have to focus on the strengths because one person's weakness is another person's strength. So you focus on the strengths and focus those one-on-one conversations on your strengths. And for me, I usually have one-on-one one-on-ones with my direct reports on a weekly basis, and then I get to figure out like what they're working on and what obstacles they're facing. Another thing I do is rotating responsibility. So what do I mean by that? I think unless a person steps into another person's shoes, you don't really appreciate the hard work involved and the complexity involved in the job. So what I usually do is say you're in an agile team and have 2 week sprints, for example. One of the things I've done is I'll rotate their responsibilities. And what I mean by that is, say, you don't have a designated scrum master, right? So I used to make a developer a scrum master for one sprint, and then in the next sprint I'll make a tester a scrum master, and then a UX designer a scrum master. So in this way a person gets appreciation for another person's role, right? Rotating responsibility. So if you have an opportunity to do that, that's the one of the best ways to empower people and get respect for another person's position. And finally, peer coaching. We spend millions of dollars in training and coaching, but then we don't realize that your team itself has amazing skill sets. So one of the things you could do is pair up people with each other to learn something. So, for example, say a developer wants to learn how to do automation, pair them up with a tester. If a tester wants to know how to, say, build mobile apps, pair them up with the developer. So peer coaching is a really great way to empower your teams as well. Let's talk about strength-based leadership. How many of you have heard about strength-based leadership? Put the thumbs up in the chat if you have heard about this. Okay. So, yeah, not a lot of people actually know about strength-based leadership, but you would have heard of Strength Finder, then disc assessment. There's so many, leadership tools to figure out what your strengths are. But one of the easiest way I have noticed to figure out the strengths is the via character strength assessment. There's a free assessment and it literally takes 5 minutes. Okay. And once you fill up that survey, you can figure out, okay, what your strengths are. So for example, when it comes to courage, so what's your most dominant trait when it comes to courage? When it comes to humanity, what's your most dominant trait? So it'll literally give you the different strengths based on your mindset. And then when you lead teams, you need to focus based on these strengths. You need to lead based on these strengths, right? So if you go to this link, you can always take a picture of it if you want. It's a via character assessment. Registration literally takes 30 seconds. Don't worry, you won't get spammed or marketed, but it's really effective. And this is something I've used in each and every team I've led. And it really helps to discover your strengths as a leader as well. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about hybrid and remote work leadership. We live in a world where we have distributed teams, and most of them are hybrid. Most of them are remote working places. So, this being the case, how do you succeed as a leader? So, when we talk about leading these hybrid and remote teams, there are three keys you really want to keep in mind. First thing is, how are you going to lead distributed teams? How do you build that culture and trust? And then how do you effectively do performance management, right? These are the three things definitely you have to work on to be an effective leader. So here's some interesting statistics for you to, digest. 87% of the employees say that they're productive working remotely. Poor communication has been one of the biggest challenges when you're working with remote workers. And when you have strong remote leadership practices, there's a 25% increase in employee satisfaction. That's why leading distributed teams effectively is really, really important in this day and age. So let's talk about that. First thing first is you have to shift focus from time-based productivity to outcome-based performance. So what do I mean by that? I say, hey, here in 2 hours, please finish this task. Okay, you finish that task in 2 hours. Does that mean you're good? Does that mean you're great? No, because okay, you finished the task in 2 hours, but what is the outcome of the task? Did you do it effectively? Did you add an extra stamp on it to make it to differentiate your work from other people? Have you applied creativity to that? So outcome based performance is more important than just time based productivity. And over communication, I'm a huge believer in over communicating via email, Slack messages, Teams messages, meetings. And for some people, it'll seem as if it's repetitive, but the more you repeat it yourself, it instills that point in the person's mind, especially you're working with on-site or offshore teams or remote teams, right? Remember, distance doesn't separate people. Silence does. Distance doesn't separate people. Silence does. So over communication is the key here, and empowering autonomy. So you give that level of autonomy to your employees, but at the same time you have to hold them accountable for it, and the way you hold them accountable for it is having frequent check-ins, one-on-ones, and make sure they're going according to the plan. And if not, it's okay, you help them divert their attention, and that's your job as a leader. So you're going to find a common pattern. I'm going to put some statistics because really want to build that awareness why the concepts which I'm going to talk about here are really, really important. Here are some interesting facts again. So trust, building trust is so important because research has found that building trust helps to reduce stress by 74%. There's 106% more energy. There's 50% higher productivity, right? And regular check-ins has found to increase employee inclusion and a sense of satisfaction by 70%. So here, these are some interesting facts on why building that culture and trust is really, really important. And when we talk about culture and trust, this is what you need to remember. When I say culture, culture isn't built in break rooms. It's built through consistency, recognition, and inclusion. And trust is the foundation of everything you do. So that's why it's really, really important to build that trust within your team. And I'm going to talk about quickly in the next slide about building trust. But one of the things I want to also mention here is rituals. When I say rituals, it's about different things you do to increase the sense of belonging with your team, the sense of camaraderie within your team. So some of the things I do as rituals are, for example, every week, again, as I was introduced, I'm a huge fan of craft beer. So every Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m., I encourage my team to bring in any alcohol or drinks they want to share with the team, and then I book a huge conference room, and then from 3 to 5 p.m. we co-work together, but we sit together, share drinks, and then people join us remotely, and then they talk about what they're drinking. And it's okay if you don't drink as well. It's not mandatory. It's building that sense of camaraderie, right? So then virtual coffee chats, those are some rituals which I'm talking about. Just some ideas for you guys as well. So I know we talked about trust, and when you say trust, I wanted to talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety, in other words, is basically the giving your employees the ability to speak up and challenge the status quo without fear of being reprimanded for their actions, right? Free speech, open communication. That's what is psychological safety. And one of the best podcast episodes I've heard on psychological safety is this one by Adam Grant, who's a psychology professor, and he consults for Google and other big companies as well on workplace environments and how to make it more uh, efficient. I highly recommend this episode. And then when you talk about psychological safety, right, there are five things you want to keep in mind. First thing is you want to make psychological safety an explicit priority. You want to facilitate open conversations. Be open-minded, compassionate, empathetic. Then you have to establish norms for how failures are handled. Do not punish risk takers. Instead, learn from failure and disappointment. Openly share your hard-won lessons or failures, and that's how we build a team. And create a space of open communication, and also foster new ideas and innovation within your team, and finally embrace productive conflict in the sense it's okay, people have different points of view. It's your job as a leader to facilitate that conversation in a cordial manner. That's why we talk about psychological safety here. Here are some more statistics, right? In terms of performance management. Um, we have 85% of the people, remote companies, have found that continuous feedback loops are really helpful. And also, data driven tracking has shown to increase performance quite a bit, right? And that's why it's really important to talk about the how you want to do performance management. So one thing when it comes to performance management is you have to keep this in mind. You don't manage what you cannot measure, but you shouldn't measure what you cannot understand. You don't manage what you cannot measure, but you shouldn't measure what you don't understand. So you got to be very careful on how you measure performance. So instead of just annual reviews, you need to have continuous feedback loops. If an employee is surprised in his or her annual review, that means you didn't do your job as a leader. Okay, that's an easy example right there. You have digital tools are really good for performance, but don't use that to micromanage people, right? And the metrics should also include some factors covering collaboration, adaptability, and innovation factors as well. So that's how you want to measure performance instead of just random numbers. This is a really uh, interesting topic and really important topic for all of us here to understand as well. How do you lead different generations, right? So let's just set some context here because I personally always get confused on which category I belong to. So let's talk about first baby boomers, right? So when I say baby boomers, it's usually people in the age of 61 to 79. And some of the things which actually highlights baby boomers are they prefer face-to-face communication, they're old school, strong work ethic, and they love mentoring people as well, right? And I respect other people for their experience. How many baby boomers do we have in this group? Put a thumbs up if there are some baby boomers here. Okay. Wow, that's good. That's good. I didn't expect too many baby boomers, but I love that people are here to learn as well. Then we have Gen X. So if you fall into the 45 to 60 category, you come under Gen X, and they value autonomy, work-life balance. Um, they love problem solving, and they don't like leaders micromanaging them, right? So that is Gen X. How many Gen X do we have? But a smiley face if you're Gen X. Let's see. Okay. There's some Gen X folks here. Okay. Okay, cool. Millennials. That's Gen Y. So we are millennials are more purpose driven, tech savvy. They believe in inclusivity and love flexible environments and then continuous feedback loops, right? They really want their leaders to be transparent. So if you fall under millennial category, uh, put thumbs up in the chat. I assume most of them, there you go. This is exactly what I expected. Most of them will be under this category or the next category, which is Gen Z. Gen Z is 13 to 28. These people are very practical, pragmatic. They really value flexibility and they want people to support mental health, right? They believe in inclusivity and authentic communication. So, how many Gen Zs do we have here in our audience? Put a smiley face. Do we have Gen? Nice. Okay. We have some Gen Zs as well. That's cool. Here are some interesting stats, right? Um, 75% of the global workforce in 2025 are going to be millennials and Gen Zs, right? And if you notice, I didn't reveal my age because Mahesh and I are very old people here. So I'm going to leave you guys just for, to guess what our ages would be or what generation we believe we fall under. But this is the future, folks. Millennials, Gen Zs, right? That is majority of the people are going to be that way. And given these stats, so how do we effectively lead different generations, right? So let's talk about that. First thing I really want to let people know is don't try to manage generations. Instead, focus on understanding individual motivators and values. Don't try to manage the generations. Focus on understanding individual motivators and values. So each generation brings unique skill sets and values and expectations, right? You need to be cognizant of that. And Gen Z and millennials prioritize purpose, flexibility, feedback. You have Gen X and baby boomers, they value structure, experience, and also avoid one size fits all leadership. As I was saying, adaptability is the key based on who you're dealing with. One of the tools which has been really, really helpful for me to manage people from different generations is having anonymous pulse surveys to get feedback on how they feel the work environment is and ask them to give feedback about you, right? And that's one of the best ways I've try to improve myself to lead people from different generations. So anonymous surveys is a great, great tool. So something you want to keep in mind. And then a couple of more things. I know I'm going a little quick, but I just want to give you as much value as possible before my time ends here. So rethinking mentorship and knowledge transfer. So mentorship must be mutual. In our old days, it's like typical hierarchical structure where you come in for a one-on-one and your manager gives you feedback and then you leave. That is not the norm anymore in this new era. It's going to be, we are going to talk about reverse mentoring. So in the sense, in your one-on-ones, it's not about you identifying obstacles for your employees. It's also about you asking them feedback about you or asking them to mentor you. So for example, if there's someone who's really good with Gen AI, for example, okay, and I want to learn about Gen AI, I would say, hey, Mahesh, I know you're doing a lot of Gen AI stuff. Can you share some resources so that I could learn as well? That is reverse mentoring. That is how you're going to learn from each other. Again, focus on the strengths, latch onto people's strengths, and then learn from each other. And cross generational learning pods. This is the concept of pairing people. Gen X with Gen Y, millennials with baby boomers, that really helps to break that barrier in communication between people. This is something I do on a regular basis as well. And also think about context on where people are coming from, right? And then shared experiences. So you could, like, based on my experience leading teams of like 50 people, I would tell another person saying, hey, this was my experience, and I've learned these things, right? You're sharing those experiences so that people get the context of where you're coming from. So rethinking the way you mentor people and knowledge transfer is really, really key here as well. And then finally, data driven leadership, right? When I Before covering data driven leadership, which is the last part which I'm going to cover, always remember that data should be an addition, not a replacement for leadership intuition. Data should be an addition, not a replacement for leadership intuition. In the sense, I always use data. I'm a data guy, but then I use my experience and intuition to make strategic and informed decisions. And data is just one factor which plays into it, right? So when we talk about data, it really helps to predict outcomes and supports transparency, but data alone isn't leadership. Okay, you always have to keep that in mind. And we have to teach our teams to question assumptions. So when you see things on the dashboard, they're all good metrics, but then you have to question, why is that 50%? Why is that 25%? What type of uh, inference you're getting from that data? And finally, this is key, folks. AI and analytics are only as good as the data behind them. Bad input is equal to flawed outcomes, right? So these are some things you really, really want to keep in mind. This is what I'm going to leave you with. I love this quote. In God we trust, all others must bring data. And then my comment is, but also bring your judgment. It's it's really important to view data for what it is and use your experience and intuition along with it. Okay. So what's next? So I have different resources for people. If I wrote an article called Three Symptoms of Toxic Leadership, you can check that out. Um, I did a TED talk about how not to be a toxic leader and how to become an effective leader as well. You can definitely check that out as well. And as they said in my introduction, I have a book called Skyrocket Your Career. Gives you strategies and tips to become the best version of themselves and be a star performer in any job you do. And this won the 2020 Best Nonfiction Book Award. So definitely check that out, right? So this one I want you guys to think about is what are some things that resonated from this talk, right? What can you relate to, and how are you going to apply them moving forward? So share those strategies and tips. Make sure you tag me on LinkedIn and share those strategies. This is how you actually contact me, and I'm very, again, grateful and privileged to be here and really appreciate everyone's time. And that's pretty much my talk. Now I can hand it over to Arun.
Yeah, awesome. Really, really loved your the whole session. I really enjoyed that. Just a second, what? I am I'm on the stream. Yep, perfect. We have a few questions and I'll just
Sure.
take one by one. Nehul is asking, what do you think are the top three skills you feel important for leading QA and estates for QA and estates?
So not only QA and stats, but if for any team for that matter, I think there are three things, right? I think you need to be technically savvy, number one. Then transparency, you have to be really transparent, and then clarity in terms of where you're going. Why are you doing what you're doing right now? So clarity, transparency, and being technically savvy. I think those are three things to effectively lead QA and estate teams.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a way to demonstrate leadership in meaningful way? You stated conversations and communication. Even when we are not traditional leadership roles, when our managers are where to pause and refocus to stay. So there's a lot of content written about, but how to demonstrate leadership? This is the question. Swapna is asking.
So for Swapna, one of the things I would say is, yeah, there are multiple things which I already mentioned through my talk, but one thing is to let people know that you're human, right? You're not perfect, and as a leader, you struggle too, and people think that you're perfect and you know everything, and that's not the case. There's so many times where I don't know what to do, and then you really need to use your team saying, "Hey, I really don't know what to do. If it was you, what would you do?" You have to
Yeah,
open that feedback and conversation. Let people know you're human. You're prone to mistakes. You have committed mistakes. Share stories of failures, and that's one of the main things I would say to do as a leader.
perfect. There's a question asked by Shahnawaz, and the question is, How to how should leader mentor a junior QA professional, not just technically, but as a future team leads or strategist?
So I think you really need to figure out where they're coming from, right? What are their strengths? Because some people, they want to be more technically oriented. Some people want to be managerial oriented. Some people want to be product oriented. So you need to first figure that out through a lot of conversations, right? And based on that, you could tell the person saying, hey, you seem to be really good when it comes to thinking about product and vision, that if you want to focus on that, then let's talk about a path where you can get there. So I think it should be a mutual conversation based on the strengths and where the people want to go, instead of saying, you know what, you have to be technical and this is what you need to do. That is one way conversation. You need to have two-way conversation where based on the person's strengths you need to pave the career path and have that conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. One last question since we have to close the session in 2 minutes. Can you please clarify more about rotating responsibilities?
Great question. So rotating responsibilities is just basically not always having one person in the team in charge of something, right? So for example, I would say one person, hey, make sure all these CI/CD jobs are always passing, and if it fails, you have to go fix it. Okay, you cannot just always leave it in one person. In order for other people to know the pain of doing it, you need to rotate that responsibility, saying, hey, you know what, this month you're going to do that, and it's okay if you have some questions, but you need to do that. And even on call, so for example, you cannot always have two people on call over the weekend. Instead, rotate that responsibility, because people have to know what it takes to be in another person's shoes, and that's when they get respect and value for what the other person is doing. So that's what I mean by rotating responsibilities. When there's a chance and an opportunity where another person can get exposure in something,
Yeah.
then do that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Raj. It is always pleasure hosting you and listening to you. I always enjoy your session. I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot for taking our time with this, right?
Thanks for always having me. It's a pleasure here. And yeah, as I was saying, I was taking a break from conferences, but when Mahesh and your team approached me, I really wanted to provide value, and this is a brand new talk. So thank you for that. So
Perfect. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
thank you. See you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Folks, I'll see you in the next session in a minute. You folks can join the session, okay? Awesome. I hope you this session was very valuable. Awesome. See you in the next session, folks.